There is a silence that is louder than any sound. It's not the silence of an empty house, but the silence that fills a room where two people have nothing left to say to each other. It sits between you, thick and heavy, like a blanket you can't push off. I lived inside that silence for years. I learned its contours, its weight, its particular chill. But the moment I truly understood it, the moment I saw my entire marriage, my entire life, reflected in that quiet, it wasn't during a fight. It wasn't when he forgot my birthday for the third time, or when he worked through another anniversary.
No.
It was on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. It was in the kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and the slow drip of the faucet I kept meaning to fix. He was reading the newspaper. I was washing a single plate, my hands in warm, soapy water. And I told him, my voice so calm it surprised even me, that my doctor had called, that there was a test, that they were concerned. He turned a page. The paper rustled, a dry, brittle sound. He didn't look up. He said, "That's good, dear. I'm sure it's fine." He didn't ask what test. He didn't ask what for. He didn't say my name. He just turned another page. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the ordinary ghosts of our life together, the chipped mug he always used, the calendar still turned to last month, the faint smell of his coffee, I finally knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be the furniture in your own home, to be so completely, utterly taken for granted that even a potential storm in your life is just background noise to someone else's ordinary day. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just kept washing that plate, watching the soap bubbles pop one by one. And I smiled. A small, sad smile to myself. Because after 32 years, the truth had finally arrived. And it was so much quieter than I had ever imagined. And my name is Helen. I've lived in this same town, in this same house, for most of my adult life. The walls here hold echoes. If you listen closely, you can hear the ghost patter of small feet running down the hallway. Our son, Ben, when he was little. You can almost hear the murmur of late-night conversations from years ago, when David, my husband, and I would sit at this very kitchen table, making plans. Big, sweeping plans that felt like they were drawn in bright colors. We were so young. David was handsome in a serious way. He had a focus about him, a drive to build a stable, secure life. He was an engineer. He liked things that made sense, things with clear rules and solid results. I was a teacher's aide at the elementary school. I loved the chaos of children, the unexpected questions, the way a day could be saved by a found crayon or a shared cookie. We were different, but we fit. Or I thought we did. I saw my role, and I cherished it. I was the maker of the home, the keeper of the calm. When David had a big presentation, I made sure his best shirt was pressed. When Ben had a science project, I was the one hunting for cardboard and glitter at 9 p.m. I remembered his mother's birthday. I coordinated holidays. I was the one who noticed when the milk was low, when the light bulb in the hallway blew, when Ben was getting quiet because something was wrong at school. Our life wasn't a grand romance from the movies. It was a series of small, practical kindnesses. Or so I told myself. His kindness was providing. My kindness was maintaining. He would come home, sometimes tired, sometimes distracted, and I would have dinner ready. He'd talk about work, about the problems he was solving there. I'd tell him about the funny thing Ben said, or about my friend Mary's new garden. He'd nod. He'd say, "That's nice." Our son, Ben, was the brilliant center of our world. He got David's logical mind but had a heart so big it sometimes worried me. He felt things deeply. When he left for college, the house didn't just get quieter. It felt like its heart had been removed. The silence that moved in then was different from the one that came later. That was an empty, waiting silence, full of memory and hope. We'd call him every Sunday, and I'd hang on every word. David seemed to take Ben's leaving in stride. "It's what they're supposed to do," he'd say. "Spread their wings." He buried himself deeper in his work. I filled my time with volunteering at the library, with gardening, with waiting for Ben's calls. We settled into a rhythm. A comfortable rhythm, I thought. We had our chairs. His by the window with the good light for reading. Mine by the lamp for my knitting or a book. We watched our shows. We discussed the news. We were a team, I believed. A quiet, steady team. I loved the life we had built. I truly did. I loved the familiar creak of the third stair. I loved the view of the maple tree in our backyard, how it blazed red every fall. I loved the history in these rooms. I thought David loved it too. I thought our quiet understanding was a kind of love language all its own. A language of shared responsibility, of a battle fought and won together to raise a good son and keep a good home. I didn't know then that I was the only one still speaking it. The small things, they say, are the big things. And it's true. The cracks didn't appear with a quake. They came with a slow, steady drip. It started with the conversations. Or rather, the end of them. I'd be talking about something I read, a story from the library, a memory from when Ben was small. I'd look over, and his eyes would be on his phone. Not listening, just waiting for me to finish. David, I'd say. Yes, dear. Sounds good. He hadn't heard a word. Then it was the forgetting, not the big things. He never forgot our tax appointment or a scheduled repair. But he'd forget that I hated mushrooms in my salad. He'd order for me at the diner and get it wrong. Oh, I thought you liked those, he'd say, with a faint shrug, as if my preferences were a minor detail he couldn't be expected to retain. One evening, I was particularly tired. I'd spent the day helping at a school book fair, hauling boxes. My back ached. He came home, went straight to his chair, and said, without looking up, "What's for dinner?" Something in me sank. It was such a normal question. He'd asked it 1,000 times. But that day, it felt like a weight. I wasn't a person who was tired. I was an appliance that was expected to function. I'm not sure, I said, my voice quiet. I'm really tired today. He finally looked at me, a flicker of confusion on his face. Well, we have to eat, he said, simple as that. A problem to be solved. By me. I made eggs. We ate in near silence. The loneliness inside a marriage is a specific kind of lonely. It's lonelier than being alone, because you are constantly reminded of the connection you don't have. It's there, across the table, reading the sports section. Ben's visits home began to highlight it. He'd burst in, full of energy, full of stories about his classes, his friends, his new ideas. He'd talk to both of us, but his eyes would seek me out. He'd ask for my opinion. He'd help me clear the table without being asked. David would watch, smiling, a pleasant spectator in his own family. Once, after Ben left, David said, "He's turning into quite a man." He said it with pride, but also with a kind of distance, as if admiring a fine piece of work he'd had a hand in constructing. Not like he'd felt the sleepless nights, the worries, the 1,000 small stitches of love that had held that boy together. I started having this recurring dream. I was in our house, but it was endless, a maze of rooms. I was looking for David. I could hear his voice sometimes, just around the corner. But every room I entered was empty. Just furniture, neatly arranged. And the silence. That heavy, waiting silence. I began to make little tests, not consciously, not at first, but small attempts to be seen. I changed my hair. I cut it shorter, added some highlights. He didn't notice for 4 days. When I finally pointed it out, he blinked. Oh, it's different. Looks fine. Fine. That was the word that began to haunt me. Dinner was fine. The movie was fine. I was fine. Everything was just fine. We were living in a world of beige, and I was starving for color. I tried to talk to him. One night, after our silent dinner, I put my hand on his arm. "David," I said, "do you ever feel like we're just going through the motions?" He put down his book politely. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," I said, the words feeling clumsy. "We don't talk like we used to. We feel distant." He patted my hand. It was the same pat he'd give a dog. "We're just tired, Helen. It's been a long week. We're fine." There it was again. Fine. I took my hand back. The conversation was over. The worst part was, to the outside world, we were the perfect couple. The stable ones. The ones who had made it. At church, at community picnics, people would say, "You two are such an inspiration." David would put his arm around my shoulders, a brief, dutiful squeeze. And I would smile my careful, fine smile. But at home, the armchair by the window was his island. My chair by the lamp was mine. And between us stretched an ocean of quiet, ordinary things left unsaid. The body, they say, keeps the score. All that quiet, all that fineness, it has to go somewhere. For me, it went into a tightness in my chest. A fatigue that sleep wouldn't fix. At first, I thought it was just sadness. Just the weight of the invisible life I was living. But then I started getting dizzy spells. Just little moments, standing up too fast, feeling the world swim. I ignored it. I was the caretaker. Caretakers don't get sick. We just keep going. One morning, making breakfast, the room tilted sharply. I had to grab the counter. My heart was fluttering in my chest like a trapped bird. I managed to get to the phone and call my doctor. David had already left for an early meeting. I left him a voicemail, my voice shaky. Just going for a checkup. Probably nothing. It wasn't nothing. After tests, my doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, sat me down. Her face was serious. "Helen, your heart rhythm is concerning. It's not beating efficiently. We need to do more tests. A stress test, an echo. We need to see what's going on in there." In there. In the heart that had been quietly breaking for years. It felt poetically cruel. I was scared. Truly, deeply scared. The facade of being fine cracked wide open. I drove home, my hands tight on the steering wheel. All I wanted was to walk in, have David look at me, really look at me, and say, "Tell me, I'm here." I needed to be the priority, just for a moment. I came in the door. He was home, sitting in his chair, the newspaper open. He glanced up. "How was your day?" The ordinary question felt like a slap. I took a breath. I decided to tell him plainly, without dressing it up. "My doctor called," I said, leaning against the doorframe for support. "The dizziness, it's my heart. They're doing more tests." She sounded concerned. I waited. I watched his face. I saw the words land. I saw him process them. And then I saw something I will never forget. A faint flicker of inconvenience. It passed quickly, replaced by his standard, practical expression. He turned a page of his newspaper. The sound was like a crackle of fire in the silent room. He didn't get up.
He didn't come to me.
He didn't ask a single question. He said, "That's good, dear. I'm sure it's fine." Fine. The world didn't slow down. It just became very, very clear. The hum of the fridge, the drip of the faucet, the dust motes dancing in a sliver of sunlight. And him, behind his wall of paper. My potential. Illness was an interruption to his routine. A small blip on his radar of a comfortable life. My fear was not something he had to share. It was my problem to manage, like the grocery shopping. I didn't move. I just stood there, in the doorway of the home I had built, and I felt something inside me settle. Not a break, but a settling. Like the final piece of a puzzle, a dark one, clicking into place. This was it. This was the truth of my 32 years. I walked into the kitchen. I ran the water. I picked up the plate from his lunch. And I began to wash it. The warm water felt real. The slick soap felt real. This simple act felt like the only true thing in the room. He finished the section, folded the paper, and stood up. He walked into the kitchen, right past me to the fridge. He took out a bottle of water. "I've got that conference call with Singapore in 10 minutes, he said. "Will you be all right?" He said it the way you'd ask if the cat had been fed. I looked at him. I saw a man I had loved. A man I had shared a bed, a child, a life with. And he was a stranger. A pleasant, familiar stranger who no longer saw me. "I'll be fine," I said, my voice calm, flat. "Good," he said, and he walked away, down the hall to his office. He closed the door. I heard the soft click of the latch. It was the quietest sound in the world. And it was the loudest goodbye I had ever heard. Finished washing the plate. I dried it. I put it away in the cupboard. I did these things with a strange, detached calm. The storm of fear and sadness was over. I was in the eye of it now, a place of terrible, clear stillness. I didn't cry that day, or the next. I went through the motions of my life, but I was observing it from a distance. I went for the stress test. I went alone. Dr. Evans held my hand while I walked on the treadmill. "Is your husband coming?" she asked gently. "He's busy," I said. And it was the truth. The diagnosis was a manageable one. A heart arrhythmia, worsened by stress and fatigue. "You need to rest," Dr. Evans said, looking at me with knowing eyes. "I mean truly rest. Not just physically. Your mind, your spirit. You have to find peace, Helen, or your body will force you to." Peace. The word echoed in the silent car on the way home. Where do you find peace when the source of your unrest is sitting in your living room? I didn't make a scene. I didn't pack a bag that night. The realization was so vast, so fundamental, that any dramatic action would have felt small beside it. Instead, I began a different kind of work. The quiet work of untangling a life. I started staying in the guest room. I told David the doctor said I needed undisturbed sleep. He said, "Okay, whatever you need." He didn't question it. I stopped doing the little things for him. I still made dinner, but I made what I wanted. If he didn't like it, he could make something himself. A strange thing happened. He didn't get angry. He just adapted. He started making his own sandwiches. It was as if he had always known how, but my service had been so reliable, he never needed to show it. The greatest shift was inside me. I stopped seeking his attention. I stopped hoping for a different response. I released him from the expectation of being my partner. In that release, I found a sliver of the peace Dr. Evans had talked about. It was a lonely peace, but it was mine. I called Ben. I didn't unload everything. He was finishing his final year, so full of his own future. But I told him about my heart, in a light way. I told him I was just tired and needed to take better care of myself. His concern was immediate, palpable through the phone. "Mom, are you sure you're okay? Do you want me to come home?" His love was a lifeline, warm and direct. It was everything his father's wasn't. "I'm okay, sweetheart," I told him, and for the first time, I felt like I might be telling the truth. "You focus on your exams. I'm just restructuring things a bit." I began to restructure. I spent more time in the garden, not just maintaining it, but redesigning it. I planted flowers that had no purpose other than to be beautiful. I reconnected with my friend Mary. We'd have coffee, and I'd listen to her problems, and it felt good to be outside of my own head. I started reading books again, not just magazines. I joined a gentle yoga class for seniors. The first time I lay on that mat and just breathed, I cried. Silent tears rolled down into my ears. No one noticed. It was safe. David floated through this new landscape. He seemed vaguely puzzled at times, but not enough to truly investigate. We were like two satellites in the same orbit, passing in the halls, exchanging information. "The gutter guy is coming Tuesday. Your sister called." Our life became a series of practical cohabitations. Then one evening, about 3 months after the day in the kitchen, he did something unusual. He came and stood in the doorway of the living room where I was reading. He had his coat on. "I'm going to the store," he said. "Do you need anything?" It was a normal question, but he had asked. He hadn't just assumed. I looked up. "No, thank you," I said. He paused. "How are you feeling?" he asked. The words sounded awkward in his mouth, like a language he hadn't spoken in a long time. "I'm well," I said. "Thank you for asking." He nodded and left. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was a tiny acknowledgement, from his distant shore to mine, that something had changed, that the weather was different. It was too little, too late to change the course I was on, but it was something. It was a moment of seeing, however faint. I knew then that I could stay. I could live out my days in this quiet, polite arrangement. Many people do. There is a certain safety in it. But Dr. Evans's words came back to me. "Find peace." or your body will force you to. My peace was not in this house. Not anymore. The silence here was a museum of my own invisibility. My peace was in the garden I was growing, in the friendship with Mary, in the quiet of my own company. My peace required space. Real space. I had begun to see myself again. Not as David's wife, or Ben's mother, but as Helen. A woman who liked certain flowers, who got dizzy at yoga when she tried too hard, who loved historical novels, who had a heart that needed care. And I realized, with a calm that felt like strength, I could not care for that heart, for that woman. While living in the shadow of a man who had forgotten her name, I didn't leave in anger. There was no fire left for that. I left in the quiet of a Thursday morning. The sun was out. The maple tree in the backyard was just beginning to turn, a hint of gold at the edges of its green. I had rented a small cottage. It was near the library, near Mary. It had a patch of garden out back. It was mine. I packed only what I needed. My clothes, my books, my grandmother's teacups. The rest was just furniture. Just things. I left a letter on the kitchen table, next to his chipped coffee mug. It was short. I wrote that I cared for him, and I always would. I wrote that I was grateful for our son, for the life we had built when we were building it together. I wrote that I was not leaving him out of spite, but toward peace. Toward my own survival. I wrote that I hoped he would find his own peace, too. I asked him to tell Ben gently, and that I would call our son that evening. I did not write "I'm sorry," because I wasn't not for this. I was only sorry it had taken me so long to listen to the quiet. When I closed the front door of the house for the last time, I didn't look back. I put my suitcase in the car. I took a deep breath of the cool autumn air. And I felt it. Not joy. Not yet. But the absence of a great weight. The silence around me was no longer heavy. It was just space. Space to breathe. Space to be. The lesson I learned, the one I carry with me now, is this. Love is not just building a life together. It is seeing the person you are building it with every single day. It is noticing when their eyes grow tired, when their laugh changes, when they are trying to tell you something with their silence. To be taken for granted is to be slowly erased. And no one deserves to disappear in their own home. My life now is smaller, quieter. I miss Ben fiercely, though he visits my cottage, and our talks are deeper, richer. He understands. He told me, "Mom, you finally look like you're here when I talk to you." As for David, we are not enemies. We speak, politely, about practical matters. Sometimes, there's a sadness in his voice that wasn't there before. A noticing of the empty space. I hope, for his sake, he learns from it before it's too late for him. 2. My heart is better. Not perfect, but better. It beats its own rhythm now, without the constant, quiet strain of being ignored. There are still hard days. Days of doubt, of loneliness. But even the loneliness has a truth to it that the loneliness inside my marriage never did. It is my loneliness. I own it. And on the good days, when I'm in my little garden, hands in the dirt, or laughing with Mary over too much coffee, I feel a flicker of something new. It's not the loud happiness of youth. It's a quiet contentment. A sense of being, finally, at home within myself. The old house, with all its echoes, is part of my story. But it is not my whole story anymore. My story now is written in the quiet moments I choose for myself. In the space between heartbeats. In the peace I finally found, not in someone else's shadow, but in my own, slowly emerging light.